Hello there, and welcome back to this spring development course. So today we're going to be going over how we can work with constructors in Spring. So how can we call the constructor of a bean we're defining, sort of. So before now, all we've really seen is how we can create a bean without actually passing in any values or modifying the bean in any way. So that's what we're going to go over today. So we're going to start with constructors. So this is just one of the ways that we can modify the bean. So we can input some values, which will then be assigned to the class. Let's get started. First of all, we're going to go over some of the beans that we've already done. Some of the sort of bean attributes that we have already gone over. So first of all, the class. So the class is, the attribute is mandatory and specifies the bean class to be used to create the bean. It's just the class that we're going to use. So in my case, I think it was com.mypackage.point or something like that. So just the class location. Then we also have the name. The attribute specifies the bean identifier uniquely. In XML-based configuration metadata, you use the ID and /or name attributes to specify the bean identifiers. Okay, and so those are the two attributes that we've already sort of gone over. So now let's take a look at the next attribute. All right, there we go, constructors. So constructors will automatically be called when a bean is created. So when our application context scans our XML file and creates the beans, the constructor will automatically be called. So we can take a look at exactly how this works in the code. All right, so here we go. So this is the exact same project that we worked on previously. So we have our pom.xml file. If it decides to open, there we go. We can take a look at it. As you can see, we have it, dependencies. Our application start, just like before, and then our point class and our beans class. Now, let's add a constructor to the point. This is going to be a default constructor, so we'll just do public point. And inside the constructor, we're going to print system.out.println. And let's just say called constructor. Okay, there we go. So now let's run our application start class. And there we go. As you can see, it called the constructor. So we can take a look at exactly what Spring does. So abstract application context, so it's preparing refresh. Then it's refreshing the class path XML application context, so it's starting it up. Then it is loading the bean definitions, and then it's finally loading the bean definitions from class. This is just the date, and it's the info. So yes, then it just loads the beans. And then it calls the constructor when it loads the beans. All right? So that is essentially how constructors work. But if we were to add something here, this also needs to be noted, so that if we add something here, so let's say message. In this case, if we run this, as you can see, we get an error, since it doesn't actually have we don't actually put anything into the constructor. And remember, in Java, if you don't have any constructor at all, it's like this, then Java will automatically create a default constructor for you. So it'll just automatically create this right here. But if you have a constructor with some message in there, then the default constructor is overridden and it doesn't exist anymore. So this is why we're getting the error. It's trying to call a default constructor when the default constructor doesn't exist. So we can do this by just doing this. We can fix this. We can fix this by just doing this. So we'll just add a default constructor, and now if you run the application start, it runs without a problem. So remember that if you have a constructor with some input into the constructor, then you must define the input in your beans.xml file. How do we do that? Well, that's what we're going to be going over right now. All right, so back in our PowerPoint, we take a look at how this worked. So this did work, and now we can take a look at passing values into constructors. So in this case, we have we have changed up my class a little bit. So we have a public my class with a constructor, string message, and then an int number. Then we print the message, comma, the number. We can pass values into a constructor by using the constructor arg val equals and then the value. If we do so, Spring will cast the values accordingly and assign them to the correct data types in the constructor. So you'll see in this case how we pass in hello and 2000, and it automatically understands that hello is a string and assigns it to message, and 2000 is an integer and assigns it to number. So in result, we'll get hello in message and then 2000 in number. So let's prove this to you. If you don't believe me, I'll prove it to you. I'll run Spring right now, and we'll take a look at exactly how it works. All right, so back in our point class, we're going to do string message, and then string, no, I'm sorry, it's going to be int number. There we go. And now, if we go ahead and do message plus, whoops, no, not equals, plus, comma, plus number, there we go. And now we need to add the constructor arg. So what we're going to do is we're going to do constructor arg value equals hello. All right, and then let's get rid of this. Instead of doing this closing, we can just do a slash here. There we go. And then let's do the same exact thing for 2000. There we go. Okay, so now what will happen is Spring will understand that hello is a string and will assign hello to message, and then it will understand that 2000 is a number and assign it to number. So let's take a look at exactly how this works, and there we go. If you run our application start class, it prints hello, comma, 2000. So message, hello, comma, number, 2000. There we go. Perfect. Of course, this presents a problem. What if we have, for example, double D float F? How will this work now? So if we put 1.4 and then 12.5 and then D and F. So how will it understand which is which? Save it, and let's take a look what happens. Well, in this case, it actually just sort of randomly tries to do it. So in this case, it puts, well, not really randomly. So we get 1.4 since it's the first constructor constructor value we assigned. It gets assigned into the first constructor input that we specify. If we get the constructor argument, since we get 12.5 second, then in that case, it puts into the second constructor input that we specify. So if we change the order of them, in theory, we should be able to now get 12.5, comma 1.4. Yeah, there we go, 12.5, comma 1.4. So in that case, it'll just do it according to the order of the, inputs. That said, what if we really did want to specify the type? Well, we can do that. Let's take a look at how we do that. All right, here we are. So specifying constructor variable types. So while Spring will cast out data types correctly most of the time, if we want to be sure that everything will work correctly, we should specify the data types. What if we had a float and a double, for example? Well, that's just what we just looked at. So here essentially is how we specify it. So we can do type, type is equal to float, or type is equal to double. If we are doing a string, though, you would have to do java.lang.string. Since it is in that package. But other than that, you can go ahead and assign int, long, short, boolean, any other data type, except if it's a complex data type, then you obviously need to assign the package. All right, and so let's take a look at how we can do this now. All right, here we are. So we're going to assign the 1.4 to double, so type equals double, and then here type equals float. So it'll assign 12.5 to float and then 1.4 to double, and so we should get 1.4 comma 12.5. Let's see if that works. There we go, 1.4 comma 12.5. So what exactly happens here? Well, first of all, it takes a look at this constructor. It sees that the argument is of type float and the value is 12.5. Then it goes to our point class. and it assigns, it sees that since we have the float, we only have one float here. And so in result, it assigns it to f. Since we have double here, it assigns 1.4 to double, since we only have one double. So that's essentially how it works. Now, if we had multiple float variables, then after that, it would go ahead and just do it based on the frequencies, not frequency, order of the values we assign. So we've put float f1 here, and then we had another float here of type float. Then in that case, it will just assign it based on the first one. So it'll assign, let's change this to 7.8. It'll assign 12.5 to the first float that it sees, and then 7.8 to the second float that it sees. So that's how that works. Of course, what if you wanted to change that? So what if you wanted to specify the order as well? Well, that is the best way to do things. It's the sort of the most reliable way of doing things, and it can never really fail. So let's take a look at how we can do that. All right, here we go. Here we are, specifying constructor variable order. Of course, the most reliable way of passing values to a constructor is by specifying the order in which that value should be passed. So let's take a look at this instance here. So we have a float, my float, and a double, my double. So then we have two constructors here. So we have 12.0 and then 2000.2. So in this case, what will happen is the index, since it's 1, 12.2 will be assigned to double, and then since the index of 2000.2 is 0, it'll be assigned to the very first constructor argument. So in this case, my float. And so that, my float will be printed first. So we'll take a look at exactly how that works. All right, here we are in our code. So right now we have double D and float f. Let's go ahead and delete this float f1. So now we can go ahead and do just the constructor argument, double and float. So here we're going to do index, whoops, nope, get rid of caps lock, index equals 1. And here we'll do index equals 0. There we go. So it takes the index on which this sort of works, the index on which we assigned our variables, totally said the wrong thing there, and assigns it correctly. So in this case, since we have index equal to 1, it's going to assign it to the second value that we assigned. So if you go to point, the second value is the float f, and so in result, it should print 7.8 seconds, since it's the second value. Since we assigned index 0 to 1.4, it'll print 1.4 first. So let's make sure it works. Let's run application context. And there we go. So you can see we get 1.4 comma 7.8 since it prints 7.8 second and then 1.4 first, since we have 0 here. And there we go. So that's really all you need to know about constructors. Now, of course, you may be wondering, how would we pass in something like, I don't know, let's just say a complex object, like another class? Well, for that, we would have to use the ref tag. And the ref tag, it sort of works a little bit differently, and it's generally a different topic on its own. So we're going to be going over that in the next lesson. So for now, let's go and just create a very simple application together, which will run, and so that we can get an idea of exactly how this works. So yeah, let's get started. All right. So together, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a calculator. So just a basic calculator, add, minus, divide, and multiply. There we go. Forgot the fourth one there. So to do that, we're going to need a calculator class. So we're going to do new class calculator, public static void main. All right, there we go. So the calculator will have 4 methods. So public void. Actually, let's just go ahead and do int num1. So we're going to have integer num1 and then integer num2. There we go. Public void divide. And then we're going to, yeah, actually, no, it's going to be an int divide. Yeah. Return num1 divided by num2. There we go. Public. Actually, no, let's make it a double. We're going to do double num1. Since when we are dividing, it should give us a double most of the time. Yeah, there we go. And then we're going to do public int multiply, return num1 times num2, public int add, return num1 plus num2, and then finally we're going to do public int subtract, return num1 minus num2. Okay, there we go. Now let's create a constructor for it. So it's going to be public calculator. Let's make these private as well, since encapsulation. There we go. Private calculator int num1, int num2, and then this dot num1 is equal to num1. No, nope, num1. This dot num2 is equal to num2. And there we go. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do the same thing here. So we're going to define our bean. So bean ID equals calc. Okay, class is going to be com example pkg dot calculator. There we go. And then we're going to pass in two constructor arguments. The index will be 0 and 1. And the first index is going to be 100, and the second index is going to be 5. All right, and there we go. So now let's go ahead and test this out in application start. So we're going to do, let's say calculator, cal equals application context dot get bean, and then the ID is, what is the ID? Calc. There we go. Calc. Totally forgot about that there. Okay, and so now we can pass in calc. All right, and then we need to cast it accordingly since it returns an object. Add cast to calculator. There we go. And now we can do print. System.out.println cal.add. All right, there we go. And so in theory, this should actually, let's just do it for add, divide, multiply, and subtract as well. Calc.add, divide, dot multiply, and then dot subtract. There we go. All right, and so this should print us 105 for add. Let's see. So what will we divide? So it's going to be 100 divided by 5. It's going to be 20 for divide. 100 times 5 is going to be 500 for multiply. And then 95 for subtract. So let's make sure that it works. And there you go. So first of all, it actually prints our constructor for this bean here. There we go. For this one right here, point. And then it goes ahead and creates this sort of calculator class, assigns 100 to x. Whoops, nope, this is the wrong one. This is point. We need to calculator. Assigns 100 to num1, and then 5 to num2. Since 5 is after, since num2 is the second index of the constructor value. So num1 is the first index since it's first, and then num2 is the second index since it is second, and so it assigns it accordingly. Then it divides, then it adds num1 plus num2, which gives 105. Then it divides num1 divided by num2, so 100 divided by 5 is 20. Then it multiplies 500, and then it subtracts 95. And there we go. So that is a very simple application that utilizes passing values into a constructor. All right, so now let's assign you some homework. All right, here we go. So the homework is to create an animal bean with a double weight, a float height, and a string species name. Then create a constructor that will assign the correct values using a Spring Bean definition XML file. So pretty simple. We've essentially done the exact same thing just now, except you just need to figure out how you can do it with strings. But as I said, it's just the same exact thing, except instead of having double or float, you would just have Java lang string in the type, or you don't even have to use a type. You can just put, you can just use the index. So whatever you want to do, try all of them. That would be ideal if you would try all of them, so that way they just sort of, you'll remember them best. But I mean, if you don't want to, I guess I have no way of making you. But it's beneficial if you would try all of them. So yeah, anyway, I wish you luck with homework, and I'll see you soon.